Settled. It is time to talk about the 5.5 patch notes for PC, which obviously will come to console later in the week. You know what, 1 week later. Starting off with skins, we got a couple cool skins. One of the most important skins is Itty Bitty Chibi AMC. Get it? Chibi. Like a chibi skin, but like a bee. So, you know, that's a thing. Skytech Zeus was actually pretty okay. Elegant Nemesis is okay. Dark Matter Kepri is amazing. Orbital Strike Artemis is amazing. And the rest are just the new legendary / gold / whatever. Only notable one is AMC because he did drugs. And he has seen things and he can't unsee them. Is basically his storyline. So, what are the big things with this patch? One, they're going to be touching matchmaking. Basically, what they're doing is, even if you click on here and you read through it, there's nothing new, basically, that they tell us, other than it's just like, hey, we're working on matchmaking, we're redoing some numbers, we're hopefully factoring in more things more accurately, and we're going to be rolling out new matchmaking incrementally. So they're going to be rolling it out at, they didn't say, but a specific time of day in specific queues. They did not mention what time of day, they did not mention what queues, but specific times of day, specific queues, in order to gather more information to see if, in fact, it made matchmaking better. And if it did, then they roll it out to all the systems. And if it didn't, then they fix it again and they keep working with it. What else is on here? They did a bunch of new player adjustment stuff for people that are basically new to Smite. So levels 1 through 30, you can see you get all of this stuff now in order. And then you keep getting more stuff, blah, 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 blah. Look at this, updated tutorial stuff. This is just like, hey, new players, keep playing Smite. We like you playing Smite. Please play more. Not super important. Hey, look at chess stuff. Godlike chess, fantasy point store. More skins for you to buy in chess. Nobody cares. All right. Into some balance changes. This should be noted. This is actually going to be a pretty important part. This general balance. This was not mentioned on the patch notes show. So even if you watched the patch notes show, you didn't see this. They are increasing the fire giant buff by 5% structure damage on the standard buff, and on the enhanced fire giant buff, which you get for killing the fire giant later in the match, it's going to up to 30% bonus structure damage. This should help deal with the Phoenixes in the late game, because everybody's having a hard time getting the push into the Phoenix range because of the new way that it's, you know, oriented to smaller area, easier to get killed, harder to push in from various directions. They're increasing the buff, so having the fire giant is going to be even more important for actually sieging the towers and the Phoenixes. Also on that note, the tier 1 tower is getting a damage buff, so level like 5, sub-level 5 dives under tower, even around that area, are going to be less effective because they increase the base power of the tower from 200 to 215. So you will take more damage from that tier 1 tower, so be careful about your early game tower dives. Moving into balance changes, the biggest item change of the patch is going to be Malice, once again getting a new passive, because why not? We give a new passive to it every other patch. But this one is strong. On successful critical strike, your abilities will deal 35% more damage for 3 seconds. Okay? Flat bonus percentage damage on your abilities for 3 seconds after a successful crit. Which means characters like Hunbat, Neja, whatever, People that have built-in crits that are ability-based are going to love this. Circuit. People that aren't even necessarily built-in crit-based, but just have a lot of ability damage, your Ulers of the world, your Neaths of the world, are probably going to want to pick up this item because they can use this, get that crit, and then pop their whole kit and do a ton of damage. So expect to see this item being tested with on a lot of different various hunters, assassins, why not even a warrior? I expect to see people just trying it because ability damage is strong. Midgardian Male getting a buff. Instead of having a proc chance to put the effect on you, it puts the effect on you every single time. The effect was cut in half, so it's 50% less effective, but it stacks 2 times. So the effect is overall the same, and now it's guaranteed every time you hit somebody with Midgardian Male, you're going to lower your attack speed and movement speed by 15% for 2 seconds, and then every time you continue to attack them, you will continue to just restack it on you. Going to be extremely strong and very hard to fight warriors that are using this in their build. I expect this item now to be stapled across the board in all situations where you're going against any sort of auto attacker. You know, unless you're going against a 4 mage comp, I expect to see everybody building Midgardian Male just because of the pure stats of it now with the passive. Witchblade getting a little bit of a buff, just getting 100 health on it. Nobody wanted to pick up Witchblade even for the aura because the item itself was so bad. So this, like, the theory is, hey, we give it 100 more health. Maybe Guardians or even a solo laner will be able to pick it up now for the passive because it's not just a bad, statistically bad item. So we'll see how much it helps it. 100 health, I mean, cool beans. But will it fit into builds? Maybe now for that situational when you want the aura. Crusher, not actually receiving any changes. They're just adding a visual to the bleed itself so you can see if you have a Crusher bleed on you. Caval getting a pretty big change. They're increasing the physical power gained from per stack on the autos from 7 to 10. So you're going back to 30 bonus physical power from Caval instead of 21. Trying to bring back in bridge items for hunters. Trying to give them items where they don't just have to focus strictly on the late game and be useless until you get to late game. Trying to give them more items where they can build them early and have an effect earlier in the game. The biggest change to an item that I think is crazy is Silver Branch Bow getting a new passive. Every successful basic attack will increase your attack speed by 5%. Stacks last for 3 seconds and stack up to 6 times. Silver Branch Bow has baseline 30% attack speed on it. And you can get another 30% attack speed, which means an item that's a bridge item that is super cheap that you can get early will give you 60% attack speed. And that is crazy. I expect to see some test builds coming out that are no attack speed in them at all, except for Silver Branch Bow, because it gives you upwards of 60% attack speed. So maybe you can get away with going some crazy, just flat damage items, and then just get away with the Silver Branch Bow attack speed, and maybe even till way later into the game. It'll be crazy. Also, gods like Kali, 60% attack speed on Kali. Bakasura, people like that also definitely in the running for using this item. Aussie increasing the attack speed by 5%. They took away 5 pen. They feel bad, so they're putting 5% more attack speed on it. I think giving this more attack speed makes Aussie pretty, I don't want to say mandatory pickup, but I want to say like very leaning towards getting picked up just because, I mean, heck, you combine Aussie and Silver Branch Bow, and then every other damage you just go power or crit or whatever. It'll be interesting to see. Spike Gauntlet, they're trying to bring back Devo gloves into the meta. So they're giving the tier 1, the 700 gold Spike Gauntlet, 5 power. Basically, nobody was building it because it gave you 7% lifesteal, and that was it. So what was the point of picking it up when you just pick up the Transcendence tier 1, which is cheaper and gives you 10 power flat, which gave you a better fight in lane / better minion clear. So hopefully this will let people start to look at Devo gloves again as an option without overwhelming transcendence. But I do think it makes it a way better early game item, and I think I would pick it up over the transcendence now. 7% lifesteal and 5 power. I like it better than the 10 flat power. 8-pointed Shuriken, once again going with this hunter theme of trying to get them things a little bit earlier, decreasing the cost of it by 200 gold. The price of Wind Demon and the other one, which name I can't remember, Poison Blade or whatever, are going up 200 gold. So the overall price of the tier 3 item is the same, but the transition to it is going to be cheaper. You can get that tier 2, this gives attack speed, critical chance power, all that kind of stuff. So you can get this a little bit earlier without having to have, it was like 1,700 gold for a tier 2, which is hilarious considering some of the items in the game are like 1,800 gold for a tier 3. So we see that being way more likely to be picked up instead of basically people just building all the way through to the tier 3. On to the god balance. Had some weird god balance this week. Not bad, just like some interesting things. Undying Love can now be cast even if Aphrodite is currently in the air from a knockup ability. So knockups are like the only form of hard CC in Smite where unless you preemptively deal with a knockup, you're in the knockup for the full duration. You can't shorten the duration, right? You can pop beads mid-air of a knockup, but it doesn't bring you down. You just waste your beads. They've always been like that. It's just the bonus. That's why they're the best form of CC in the game. You have to preemptively beads a knockup. You can't just beads in the middle of it like a stun or whatever. But now, Aphrodite will be able to ulti inside of a knockup. So, if you're knocked up by Bacchus on Aphrodite and you don't want to take all the damage you're about to take, you can ulti. Or if you get knocked up and then they were focusing on the person you were connected to, you can still ulti them as well to save them. So it's a buff. It's just weird. Cabrakan, not so much getting a buff, so much as getting a new indicator, which is great. His ultimate, for those that have played Cabrakan, you know that his ultimate felt like it didn't do the damage when it was supposed to all the time. They're changing his indicator, so now you understand that the wall area of the ability doesn't do damage. It's just the line. So like the corner areas will no longer like be indicative and be like, hey, you can do damage here when it never did damage there, which is nice because it's so annoying. Chang'e increases the persist time of her Moonflower Dance from 0.6 to 0.7. This was to fix kind of similar to Cabrakan, but basically there was one spot on Chang'e where your Moonflower started here and then it went around you, but it didn't end here. It actually ended like here, which meant that there was a very tiny area where you wouldn't do damage or heal a teammate. So they're just fixing that. Sobek, one of my least favorite changes actually of this patch, a nerf. A weird nerf, but a nerf. Sobek Pluck has an invulnerability frame from the moment that you hit him until basically the start of the throwing animation, okay? So you hit somebody with a pluck, it starts to throw them, but in between that little time, you were like immune to damage, and you could use it to avoid Krakens and all sorts of things. They're taking that away. You are now always able to take damage on Sobek. It's actually a fairly decent nerf. I think people underestimate how much damage they were avoiding by this immunity frame. So that's very similar to actually what they did to Quang last week. They took away his immunity frame as well. It seems that they're slowly going through and taking away any sort of God invulnerability frames. Quang got nerfed. They decreased his Dragon Call. That's when you summon all of your dragons. Instead of each dragon having 15% scaling, each dragon will have 13% scaling. So to overall reduction of 12% magical scaling on this ability. He'll still be totally fine. Still be totally usable. He'll be a little bit less annoying, but Quang is still just in a dandy place. Daji. Daji getting a passive nerf. They decreased the passive physical scaling from 20 to 14% on that, which is a 10 to 7% per tick because it ticks twice. And her physical power scaling on her 1, which is her auto attack cancel / slow / bleed, is getting a 10% damage reduction. Overall, pretty decent nerf to Daji. She's still going to be super strong. Everything she brings, she still do a ton of damage. But hopefully this stops her like 100 to 0% one-shots with just using like blink auto, 1 auto, which is kind of what this is trying to deal with. Colin getting a very specific change. Colin will no longer get both abilities at level 1 when you transform. This was a pretty high-end level change. Not many people low level even knew about it, but when you transformed at level 1, you got your abilities on Colin in the other form, even without putting points into it. So they're taking that mechanic of his kit away. So you have to have points in your abilities to actually get the ability. This was a feature of the 1 and the 3 of Colin. You always get his 2 because that's just part of it. But the 1 and the 3 specifically. Discordia getting a small nerf. All they're doing is increasing the cooldown of her dash, her leap. So Discordia already one of the riskier mages in Smite, just making her even riskier, making her small leap longer cooldown, so you have more time to kill her in between her dashes. Ice is getting huge buffs, increasing her movement speed by 5, which is always nice. More movement speed is better. Reducing the cooldown of her Dispel Magic, which is her silence / armor transfer by 2 seconds, which is nice because it was a super long cooldown. And most importantly, increasing the max charge / healing scaling from 1.5 to 3.5 to 2.5 to 3.5, meaning that damage / healing scaling in the early game is way better. I mean, immensely better. And they're increasing the damage reduction that the circle provides you while it's up from 15% flat to 15% scaling to 20% in the late game standing in the circle. Isis just got so good off of this change. I mean, early objectives, late game objectives, Phoenix pushing, tower pushing, fire giant, everything just got super, super better with her. And I expect to see her getting played quite a bit now with these changes. Wukong getting a little bit of a love tap, increasing the damage of his tickle stick by 10 damage per rank and decreasing the mana cost towards the late game, not the early game. Sun Wukong not really getting played because he doesn't have Blue Stone anymore. It's not really going to do anything for him, I don't think. Vulcan getting some decent changes, though, actually. Increasing the damage just like Wukong by 10 at every rank for his backfire. Increasing the bonus damage that his cannon does to targets that are marked by backfire by 5%. And increasing the power scaling of Inferno Cannon by 5%. So an overall effectiveness of 10% magical scaling increase for your Inferno Cannon when you actually land your backfire on somebody. I think Vulcan's actually in a decent spot right now in this meta. I think he's kind of underestimated. I think he has super low cooldowns and thrives with the builds right now going on. These Warlock / Spear of Desolation, builds. I think he really thrives with them. And I think that this is going to put him in a great spot. Great spot. Erlang Shen getting a pretty huge buff as well. They fixed his attack progression where basically his damage was doing less damage than his attack progression. It was weird till they fixed it. Spot weakness, which is your 1 auto attack, will now reduce your cooldowns by 1 second per auto instead of 0.75 seconds per auto, which is huge for your cooldown. And your pin, which is your throw ability / root, the damage scaling has been increased by 10%, which is more of like a mid-game change, get a little bit more poke off and stuff. It shouldn't help out that much with lane clear because it's scaling, right? It's not like flat damage, so you're not getting it right off the bat. But overall, good changes for Erlang Shen. Combined with things like the Ichivile change, Erlang Shen might really thrive with that, going more like a Erlang Shen jungle, we might be able to see something like that pop out, which we haven't seen in a while, because he's pretty good at ganking. People forget how strong a root pen is into, you know, turtle form knockup / then you taunt them. He has a lot of CC. Those are all the changes for this patch. On the whole, all the changes are good. I don't really have any complaints outside of we'll have to test Silver Branch Bow. The idea of 60% attack speed on one item seems kind of silly. Malice is going to be a super situational item for gods, but for the gods that it's going to work on, I think it might really put some gods over the top, strictly because this item exists, which might be a bit much. Other than that, though, all the changes I'm down for. I think they're all good. And those patches will go live on Tuesday, which is March 27th, for PC. And that is that. Thank you guys for coming out to the stream today. I appreciate it. We will be back. Thanks everybody for watching the video. If you want to watch more content, go ahead and click yourself down in the corner to watch another one of our videos. If you'd like to subscribe to the channel, you can find that right up on there. And if you want to go ahead and buy some sweet merchandise, guys, you can click that right above my head. Thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, have a twitching day.